Mirror Talk, The Language of the Nervous System, Episode 7, The Script of Silence. Welcome back to Mirror Talk, and thank you for being here, for choosing once again to listen inward, to notice how your words shape your world, and how even your quiet carries meaning. In every conversation we've shared so far, we've traced the invisible threads between language and the nervous system, how sound, tone, and syntax can either contract or expand the body, how phrases become states, and how words become memories that live deeper than thought. We've explored how apology loops reveal empathy entangled with guilt, how projection and misunderstanding build walls across dialogue, and how wounds can echo as inherited self-talk. Today, we move into subtler territory, into the spaces between words, to examine silence itself. Silence is often regarded as emptiness, but in truth, it is one of the most profound forms of communication we possess. Every unsaid word vibrates through the body like a withheld breath, a sentence paused before the ending. Sometimes silence protects, sometimes it punishes. Sometimes it waits for safety to return, and sometimes it signals that safety was never to begin with. In this episode, we'll unravel what silence really means, not just in speech, but in physiology, in thought, and in identity. We'll ask, when is quiet a conscious choice, and when is it a nervous system contract signed long ago? We'll trace the origins of suppression, from early conditioning and cultural scripts to digital communication and modern forms of withdrawal, and we'll learn how to reclaim voice, softly and slowly, until expression feels like safety rather than risk. Silence is language. It is the punctuation between survival and expression. It carries memory, intention, and meaning, even when the tongue remains still. The language beneath the pause. Before a child learns to speak, their nervous system learns to listen. They sense tone, rhythm, and the rise and fall of a caregiver's voice. When tension enters a room, they feel it first in their body, a breath held, a shoulder lifted, eyes searching for safety. Speech comes later. Syntax is a late stage of survival. From the start, the body translates the environment into language. It listens not only to sound, but to absence. When a parent withdraws attention, the nervous system records that too. A silence filled with uncertainty. The body notes, when love retreats, I must become quiet to keep it close. Thus, the first grammar of suppression is learned, not through rules, but through regulation. This is the foundation of NSL, nervous system language. The body states are its syntax. Fight speaks through force, flight through evasion, freeze through stillness, and fawn through appeasement. Silence in this lexicon is not empty, it is the vocabulary of safety under threat. The child learns to translate emotional weather into behavior, and often, that translation becomes lifelong speech. The mirror linguistic hypothesis, MLH, builds upon this understanding. It suggests that language, spoken, unspoken, and reflected, is a mirror of the state. What we hear becomes what we say becomes what we feel, and what we feel becomes the lens through which we perceive ourselves and others. Silence, then, is a mirror too. It reflects both the longing to be seen and the fear of exposure. It's the pause between authenticity and acceptance, the tension of a self waiting to be welcomed. Silence as adaptation. For many of us, silence began as an adaptation. It was not chosen, it was inherited. In households where speaking up meant conflict, children learned that compliance kept peace. In classrooms where curiosity was labeled as disruption, they learned that inquiry invited punishment. In relationships where emotion was dismissed, they discovered that stillness earned approval. Over time, this conditioning settles into the body as a rule. Be quiet and you will be safe. But safety built on suppression is not safety, it is suspension. It is a body paused in vigilance, a mind rehearsing every line before it's spoken, a throat that tightens before the first word leaves. And while silence may once have shielded us, it eventually shapes us. The cost of constant quiet is disconnection from others, and from our own truth. Modern psychology and neuroscience affirm what ancient wisdom long observed, that unexpressed emotion does not dissolve. It embeds. Bessel van der Kolk in The Body Keeps the Score describes how trauma silences speech through the vagus nerve, reducing access to language in moments of high arousal. When stress overwhelms the system, blood flow to Broca's area, the region responsible for verbal expression, decreases. The body literally loses words. The person feels speechless, not metaphorically, but neurologically. This is why many people, during arguments or moments of fear, find themselves frozen, knowing what they wish to say, but unable to form the words. The nervous system has prioritized survival over syntax. When these episodes repeat, through childhood, education, relationships, or workplaces, they sculpt neural pathways of silence. The body learns to mute expression before danger appears. The mouth closes before the message forms. This becomes a habit, then identity. The person begins to call themselves quiet, introverted, or non-confrontational, without realizing these traits are often trained responses, not intrinsic personality. The many faces of silence. Not all silence is created equal. There is the silence of peace, a stillness chosen after understanding. There is the silence of contemplation, a pause that deepens presence. There is the silence of reverence, the wordless awe before beauty. And then there is the silence of suppression, the gap between self-awareness and self-permission. This episode focuses on the latter, not the silence of wisdom, but the silence of a wound. The quiet that comes from fear of rejection, ridicule, or rage. The kind of silence that builds around unmet needs like sediment, layer upon layer, until the original voice is buried. Silence can masquerade as maturity. It can look like patience, restraint, or neutrality. But when it's driven by fear, it's not peace, it's paralysis. It's a truce between the true self and the survival self. In relationships, this silence often takes the form of avoidance. Partners argue, but one retreats, not to process, but to preserve. In friendships, a boundary is crossed, but rather than speak, one withdraws, ghosting or fading into ambiguity. Online, silence becomes passive resistance, seen messages, no reply, opinions withheld for fear of backlash. The digital age has amplified this phenomenon. We live in a world where communication is constant, yet understanding remains rare. Silence can mean apathy, overwhelm, protest, or punishment, and without tone or presence, interpretation fractures. The nervous system responds to absence just as it does to attack. Heart rate rises, breath shortens, mind races to fill the gap. The unknown becomes the threat. Silence in the body. To understand silence, we must listen to the body's version of it. When the throat tightens, it's a sentence swallowed. When the jaw clenches, it's an argument contained. When the shoulders lift, it's a shield raised. When breath halts, it's a story paused mid-chapter. These are microscripts of suppression, embodied punctuation. Each gesture is a grammatical mark in the language of survival. The subconscious, which governs over 90% of daily decision-making, operates through these cues. It reacts before reason, guided by neural shortcuts known as heuristics. Once formed, these patterns become hard-coded reflexes, looping through situations even when the context has changed. This is why an adult, long removed from childhood danger, may still feel their throat tighten in disagreement. The body remembers faster than the mind reinterprets. Silence, then, is both linguistic and limbic. It is a memory encoded in muscle and myelin. The path to reclaiming voice is not just intellectual, it is physiological. To speak again, one must retrain the body to believe that speech is safe. Practicing presence, aligning body and brain. Before we explore how silence becomes script, let's ground this in practice. A short exercise to bring body, so take a breath. Notice what's unsaid. The silence you carry is not a void, it's a message waiting to be translated. Let's listen. The anatomy of silence is not the absence of sound. It is a physiological language, a dialect of the nervous system spoken through withheld words, slowed breath, and the micromuscles that hold back expression. When we go quiet, it isn't always peace. Often, it's protection. Some silence is formed through conditioning, the lessons that speaking invites danger, ridicule, or dismissal. Others grow through observation, watching caregivers swallow emotion, learning that stillness equals safety. The child internalizes these scripts, equating restraint with survival. Over time, silence becomes a reflex, not a choice. In mirror linguistic hypothesis, MLH terms, silence reflects the unspoken mirror, communication that once occurred beneath language now encoded into posture, tension, and pause. Under nervous system language, NSL, this is the freeze dialect, when the body, flooded with threat signals, prioritizes safety over speech. From a polyvagal lens, this is not failure. It is a sequence when fight or flight are unavailable or unsafe. The vagus nerve shifts the system into dorsal stillness. The throat constricts, vocalization falters, words dissipate before reaching breath. Language requires physiological readiness. The body must first believe it's safe enough to be heard. Silence as signal. Every silence carries information. Some are appeasement silences, where we swallow words to stabilize another's emotion. Others are withdrawal silences, where retreat becomes the only defense against chaos. There are reflective silences, pauses chosen for presence, and strategic silences, designed to control narrative space. Each variation has its own tone, texture, and neurochemical imprint. From a psychological perspective, silence can mask multiple internal states: shame, fear, analysis, dissociation, and reverence. The context determines the code. In trauma-informed communication, silence may not mean agreement or emptiness, but rather processing. The brain is buffering, the mouth waits for coherence. Yet culturally, silence is often misread. In argument, it's seen as guilt. In leadership, a weakness. In friendship, as distant. We live in a world that rewards articulation, where speed, sound, and spectacle are mistaken for intelligence. But speech without regulation is merely a reaction in verbal form. The body's quiet can hold more truth than the tongue's haste. The subconscious architecture of quiet. Most of our silences are not chosen by thought but by subconscious automation. Research from cognitive neuroscience suggests that up to 95% of decision-making occurs beneath conscious awareness. Our subcortical systems, the limbic structures, basal ganglia, and cerebellum, orchestrate habitual responses faster than the prefrontal cortex can intervene. This is why many individuals, especially those with early attachment rupture find themselves mute in conflict or hyperverbal when threatened. These are hard-coded heuristic, reflexive shortcuts carved through repetition and emotional salience. Neural pathways, once established through survival, favor predictability over novelty. In digital communication, this manifests as echo chambers, social spaces that reinforce subconscious alignment. The algorithms mirror our biases, curating content that validates our internal scripts. When presented with dissonant views, the nervous system reacts defensively. Muscles tighten, breath shallows, tone sharpens. The body codes dissent as danger. Common phrases such as "you're crazy" or "that's a conspiracy" act as linguistic dismissals, shutting down discourse and restoring perceived order. These are not merely intellectual moves, but neurophysiological closures, ways to maintain homeostasis within one's belief schema. The tongue defends what the amygdala fears. Conscious alignment practice. To interrupt this cycle, we must reconcile body and cognition. A simple NSL-aligned practice for conscious integration. 1. Name the state. Before engaging in dialogue, online or offline, pause and scan. What's my current state? Fight, tight chest; flight, restless legs; freeze, numbness; or fawn, over-agreeing. 2. Ground the body. Place both feet on the floor. Inhale slowly through the nose for 4 counts. Hold for 2. Exhale for 6. This activates parasympathetic dominance, opening access to social engagement circuits. 3. Set intention. Ask, am I here to connect or to correct? Language follows physiology. Aligning purpose refines phrasing. 4. Speak slow. Pace regulates perception. The slower the tempo, the greater the chance that meaning will match message. 5. Reflect after dialogue. Notice how your body feels, expansive or contracted. These sensations reveal whether your words were congruent or coerced. This alignment ritual retrains the nervous system to associate communication with calm rather than conflict, reprogramming the silence script from suppression to sovereignty. Self-reflection prompts. Take a quiet moment to meet your silence, not as an enemy, but as a mirror. You might journal, voice note, or sit in awareness with these. When did I first learn that silence keeps me safe? What kind of silence do I use most? Appeasement, withdrawal, observation, or thought? Do I recognize the difference between chosen quiet and reflexive muteness? Whose voice or presence makes my own voice disappear? How does my body feel before, during, and after I withhold words? What message might my silence be trying to deliver that my mouth cannot yet say? These are not for quick answers. They are openings, invitations to witness the old contract rather than fight it. Awareness is authorship's first draft. Integration practice. Body to breath to word. A simple NSL-aligned sequence designed to thaw the freeze gently and safely. 1. Body. Notice where your silence sits. Close your eyes. Ask, if my silence had a home in this body, where would it live? Throat, chest, stomach, shoulder. Place a hand there. No judgment, just contact. 2. Breath. Offer rhythm. Inhale slowly through the nose. Count of 4. Pause 2. Exhale through the mouth. 6. Feel the exhale lengthen. Whisper release if it feels right. Do this 3 times. This breath pattern shifts the vagal tone from alertness to access. 3. Word offer language. Without forcing, let one word rise, not a sentence, just a signal. It might be safe, ready, present, or even mute. Whatever surfaces is the body's lexicon in that moment. Speak it aloud softly, twice. Feel the vibration. Repeat daily, same time, same setting, to teach your nervous system that expression can coexist with calm. Over time, that single word will expand into sentences. Real-world application. In conversation, when you notice the urge to go silent, silently name your state, freeze, fatigue, or choice. This micro-labeling interrupts automaticity and reintroduces authorship. In a relationship, if silence surfaces mid-dialogue, try verbal transparency. I need a breath to find my words. This shifts the script from absence to agency. Your quiet becomes communication, not confusion. In solitude, record a brief voice note once a day. 1 sentence, 1 thought, 1 truth. You don't need to share it. Hearing your voice is exposure therapy for the auditory self. It refamiliarizes the nervous system with expression. Integration thought silence isn't something to break. It's something to translate. Each pause is a phrase in your body's dialect. Listen first, then decide what it's ready to say. Now that we've explored the anatomy and intention of silence, how it forms, where it lives, and what it protects, we turn to its deeper grammar. In the next element, we'll examine how external corrections become internal narration, tracing how the words once used to silence us evolve into the scripts of shame that echo within. Scripts of suppression, how we learn to stay quiet before silence becomes a choice. It's a lesson. We learn early that some truths are too heavy for certain rooms, some tones too sharp for fragile authority, and some emotions too raw for public space. The voice shrinks not out of emptiness, but out of training. Suppression rarely announces itself. It arrives in subtle corrections. Lower your tone. That's not how we speak here. Why are you getting so worked up? Be respectful. Each phrase encodes a rule that calm equals correctness, that restraint equals virtue. Slowly, expression becomes an act of risk. From a developmental lens, these early verbal boundaries form the scaffolding of conditioned compliance. The nervous system pairs safety with submission. The child learns that belonging depends on how much of themselves they can mute. By adulthood, this muteness is mistaken for personality, quiet, agreeable, low maintenance. But beneath those labels often lies a history of micro-corrections, small linguistic fractures where authenticity once tried to speak. The family as first mirror home is often the first stage where voice becomes choreography. Tone, volume, and timing are not spontaneous, they're rehearsed. The family's dominant emotional state sets the tempo. In loud homes, you learn to project; in volatile ones, to tiptoe; in dismissive ones, to swallow your truth before it spills. When a parent says, "You're too sensitive," they're not only describing your emotion, they're prescribing your range. Each correction teaches the body to read expression as exposure. Over time, the nervous system learns that safety lives in silence, and the mouth becomes a gatekeeper against potential rejection. In MLH terms, these parental phrases become mirror imprints, reflections of external control internalized as self-regulation. The voice you silence isn't disappearing, it's adapting, reflecting what authority rewarded. Be polite becomes a reflexive filter. Don't make a scene becomes a linguistic cage. Cultural and social conditioning beyond family. Culture extends the script. In many traditions, quiet equals respect, a sign of deference to elders, leaders, or divine order. Emotion, especially anger or grief, is often pathologized. Keep it together, don't lose face, strong people don't cry. These idioms, repeated over generations, merge spiritual and social restraint into one identity. Gender compounds this conditioning. Women are often taught that their voices must soothe, never challenge, that softness is virtue and assertion, arrogance. Men, conversely, inherit stoicism, vulnerability coded as weakness, emotion equated with loss of control. Both are prisons painted as poise. Religion and belief systems can deepen the divide. Silence as obedience, speech as sin. The sacred becomes another stage where suppression masquerades as discipline. The body's role in suppression, every silenced word leaves residue in the body. The NSL perspective frames suppression as a state pattern. Breath shallow, jaw tight, shoulders raised, tone flattened. These micro-gestures don't just express submission, they reinforce it. The body becomes fluent in appeasement. Repeated long enough, these cues become baseline physiology. We no longer choose to soften tone, the vagus nerve does it for us. Speech contracts, voice wavers. Even when no one is watching, the echo remains. An autonomic apology for existing too loudly. The modern script, digital suppression today. Suppression thrives in subtler arenas. Online, tone is filtered through algorithms and performance. We self-edit for optics, flatten language for palatability, and preempt misunderstanding with emojis. The nervous system, conditioned to equate visibility with vulnerability, translates every audience into a potential threat. In echo chambers, dissent is punished with silence or ridicule. You're overreacting. You're reading too much into it. Stop being dramatic. The same old scripts, repackaged for the comments section. Suppression has simply migrated platforms, its roots unchanged. Mirror and nervous system insights MLH. Suppressed voice equals internalized reflection of external control. Every correction mirrors back a smaller version of the self. NSL, breath and tone encode state. Chronic softness, hesitancy, or vocal tremor are not personality quirks. They are somatic signatures of submission. Suppression is not the opposite of communication. It is communication, one that the body speaks fluently when safety feels conditional. Reflection pause here. Notice your breath. Ask gently, whose comfort does my silence protect? What parts of myself were trained to disappear for peace? When I quiet my truth, whose voice do I echo? Awareness is not rebellion, it is recognition. To name the script is to begin revising it. The voice doesn't only shrink in rooms we can touch, it also fades across the screens we stare into. Our digital worlds replay the same lessons learned in childhood. That visibility can invite danger, that words can wound faster than they can heal, and that silence is still the safest performance. But online, quiet becomes more complex, sometimes a protest, sometimes protection, sometimes proof of fatigue. In the next element, digital quiet, silence in the age of overexposure, we'll explore how the nervous system navigates constant visibility, how ghosting mirrors the freeze response, and why even written silence can trigger physiological echoes of rejection. Digital quiet, silence in the age of overexposure. We were told the internet would give us a voice. What it often gave us instead was a stage we never agreed to stand on. In the age of overexposure, silence isn't absence, it's a strategy. Online, quiet becomes a nervous system negotiation. How much of myself can I reveal before the cost outweighs the connection? Each post, message, or pause carries physiological weight. To click send is to enter a public square where visibility is volatile and permanence is punishing. To remain silent is to retreat, but retreat online reads as rejection. This is the paradox of digital expression. In a world of constant speaking, silence still speaks loudest. The nervous system online. Our devices act like portals for projection. Ghosting is not always a statement of another's worth, but a reflection of the ghost's internal bandwidth. Their silence mirrors their own dysregulation, not your deficiency. In NSL terms, the absence is not neutral. Each unanswered message can trigger a cortisol spike and vagal constriction, mimicking the embodied sensation of social rejection. The heart quickens, breath shallows, and the mind loops, searching for safety in meaning making. This is why closure is less about final words and more about physiological completion, allowing the body to process an ending that never spoke. Overexposure and the illusion of connection. The irony of our age is that we've never spoken more or felt less heard. Every caption, comment, and story promises connection, yet often leaves the body emptier. Overexposure, the habitual broadcasting of personal thought, can desensitize the nervous system, flooding it with pseudo-intimacy while depriving it of reciprocity. We reveal constantly, yet rarely risk being known. The self becomes a performance algorithmically tuned to feedback. The more we speak, the less we say. In MLH framing, this creates a semantic inversion. Words lose weight through repetition. Tone becomes branding, and silence becomes the last authentic gesture. When language is commodified, quiet feels like reclamation. But silence online isn't always sovereignty. Sometimes it's self-erasure. The retreat of voice is worn out by misinterpretation, outrage, or fatigue. The fear of misreading, that your meaning will be weaponized or dismissed, births self-censorship loops. Over time, authenticity contracts. We speak only what is safe to post, not what is true to feel. The nervous system learns this loop like muscle memory. 1. Expression leads to misinterpretation, which leads to potential criticism, and from this withdrawal. 2. Anticipation of criticism leads to a form of preemptive silence. 3. Silence can then manifest as disconnection, leading to feelings of loneliness and self-blame. The cycle reinforces itself until suppression feels like integrity. The body reads the feed when we scroll. We don't simply observe, we absorb. Each post cues micro-evaluations. Am I enough? Am I too much? Do I belong here? Even passive consumption is interactive. Each exposure reshapes the nervous system's baseline through dopamine and cortisol seesaws. This is why many describe feeling wired but tired after time online, a simultaneous high alert and low reward state. The body is multitasking between vigilance, tracking threat, and yearning, seeking validation. Silence, stepping back from the feed, becomes the only available vagal exhale. Yet withdrawal can be misinterpreted, seen as arrogance, disinterest, or abandonment. Here the paradox repeats. The body's act of care reads socially as cruelty. Mirror Insights MLH. The screen is a mirror. Absence and attention both speak. The unsent message and the unread one carry equal linguistic weight. Both shape the story the nervous system tells about safety and significance. NSL. Written silence triggers a physiological response. Even a scene without reply evokes threat circuitry, proving that perception, not presence, governs safety. Every online exchange is a small experiment in resonance. Some echo, some vanish, but even the vanishing leaves vibration. Self-reflection prompts pause for a moment. Notice your breath. Reflect with curiosity. What does my body feel when unseen or unheard online? Do I post to connect, to perform, or to prove I exist? When I go quiet digitally, what am I protecting, peace or pride? How do I respond to another's silence, with empathy or assumption? What would it mean to speak online, as though my body could hear every word? These reflections are not indictments, they're diagnostics. They reveal the nervous system's literacy in an environment designed for noise, not nuance. The silence we practice online often echoes an older contract, one formed long before the internet, in spaces where obedience was mistaken for virtue. What begins as self-protection becomes self-definition. Quiet transforms from shield to identity. Over time, the body equates muteness with morality, as though restraint alone could guarantee safety or goodness. To understand this deeper architecture, we turn now to the echo of obedience, exploring how modeled compliance becomes conditioned virtue, how attachment bonds reward quiet over authenticity, and how our nervous systems still breathe in patterns of submission that once kept us close but now keep us small. Psychological insight: the echo of obedient silence rarely stays external. Over time, it becomes an interior voice, a grammar of restraint that shapes how we think, speak, and even breathe. What once began as an act of safety, withholding truth to preserve a relationship or order, gradually transforms into a form of selfhood, a quiet moral code written into the nervous system. Many of us inherited this code without consent. We learned that virtue was volume control, that goodness lived in composure, and that emotional expression meant weakness or disorder. To speak loudly was arrogance, to disagree was rebellion. In this way, obedience was dressed as integrity, and compliance, especially silent compliance, became the currency of belonging. But when silence becomes a sign of virtue, voice is mistaken for vice. Conditioned virtue. Bandura and the modeling of quiet Albert Bandura's social learning theory teaches us that behavior is modeled before it is moralized. We imitate what earns approval, especially in our early environment. When caregivers, teachers, or communities reward compliance, nods of praise for good behavior, smiles for quiet, the nervous system learns to equate stillness with safety and agreement with love. These lessons become moral imprints. The child, lacking autonomy, observes what garners attention and constructs a self around those patterns. Over time, obedience becomes identity. In many households, the phrase well behaved was synonymous with well controlled. Children were lauded for sitting still, speaking softly, and not asking too many questions. The lesson beneath the praise: your worth lies in your ability to contain yourself. Bandura's model of vicarious reinforcement explains how this conditioning becomes self-sustaining. Even without external authority, the adult continues to police their own tone and timing, anticipating judgment. They perform submission long after the teacher leaves the room. Within the mirror linguistic hypothesis, MLH, this is the process of internalized mirroring. The voices that once corrected us now live within us, projected as conscience. Silence becomes an echo chamber of obedience, each withheld word a reflection of the authority we once mirrored for survival. In nervous system language (NSL) terms, this is not merely psychological, it is somatic scripting. Chronic appeasement rewires physiology: shallow breath, monotone voice, tense jaw. These cues become embodied punctuation marks in our communication, signaling compliance, even when our thoughts dissent. Attachment and the economics of quiet. Bowlby's insight. John Bowlby's attachment theory deepens this understanding. For a developing child, proximity to a caregiver equals survival. When emotional expression threatens that proximity, a tantrum is met with withdrawal. Anger is punished by isolation, and the child learns that quiet preserves connection. This adaptation is intelligent. If raising one's voice means losing the parent's gaze, the body recalibrates. The nervous system trades authenticity for attachment, encoding a strategy of silence. Bowlby would describe this as an insecure avoidant or anxious fawn response, not born of defect, but necessity. In adulthood, these early equations persist. Many find themselves mute in conflict, unable to articulate boundaries or needs. Their bodies, recalling ancient contingencies, still prioritize closeness over truth. They pause mid-sentence, lower tone, or apologize for existing too loudly, all signs of an attachment system trained to see calm submission as love's language. Under NSL, this translates as state-dependent voice modulation. The vagus nerve, attuned to relational threat, constricts tone when safety feels conditional. Speech flattens, breath becomes high and thin. The voice doesn't just express obedience, it enacts it. MLH frames this as semantic inheritance. Phrases like "don't upset your mother" or "we don't raise our voices" evolve into internal dialogue. Keep the peace. Don't make waves. You'll lose them if you're honest. The syntax of early care becomes the script of adult compliance. Thus, silence in adulthood is often not suppression but continuation, the latest verse in a song first hummed in childhood. The false self. Winnicott and muted authenticity. Donald Winnicott's concept of the false self offers another layer. When the environment fails to mirror the child's spontaneous expressions, dismissing, mocking, or punishing authenticity, the child constructs a compliant persona to secure care. This false self is not deception, it is adaptation. It smiles when sad, agrees when uneasy, and expresses gratitude when resentful. The true self retreats underground, guarded by the nervous system's protective silence. Winnicott observed that chronic falseness breeds emptiness. The adult may appear functional, even admirable, yet internally they report a sense of unreality, a life performed, not lived. They may say, "I don't know what I feel," or "I just go along with things." These aren't signs of indifference but symptoms of a muted core. In MLH terms, the false self speaks a borrowed dialect, its words rehearsed from others' expectations. Every sentence is an imitation, every pause a survival cue. The inner voice, shaped by outer approval, echoes others more than self. NSL reveals this too. Somatic submission. Shoulders slope inward, diaphragm tightens, vocal tone thins. The physiology of politeness is indistinguishable from the physiology of fear. When muteness masquerades as maturity, the nervous system confuses restraint with righteousness. The unspeakable truth. Lacan and the Limits of Language. Jacques Lacan famously said, "The unconscious is structured like a language." In his view, silence is not absence but a symptom, the body's grammar revealing what cannot be articulated. When trauma, shame, or desire exceeds what our inherited language can hold, we fall mute. The unspeakable finds other roots: tension, symptom, repetition. Silence here is not obedience, but overflow, the failure of available symbols to contain lived reality. In the mirror linguistic hypothesis, this becomes a question of representation. If language is learned through mirrored interaction, and those mirrors rejected certain truths, then those truths remain linguistically orphaned. We cannot speak about what was never reflected. Thus, silence often hides not ignorance but insight, truths too large or forbidden for the family's grammar. Under NSL, this translates as a physiological jam. The sympathetic system accelerates while the parasympathetic brake holds. The result: shallow breath, tremor, stutter, is the body trying to voice what words were never permitted to name. Here, obedience is not choice, it's incapacity. The system obeys the old rule, don't say it, because no alternative syntax exists. The cognitive schema. My truth is dangerous. Cognitive psychology describes these learned patterns as schema, internal frameworks that filter perception and dictate response. Once truth equals danger becomes encoded, the mind edits reality to confirm it. You hesitate before sharing an opinion, expecting backlash. You replay conversations, scanning for disapproval. You apologize for honesty, fearing it will be mistaken for harm. Each repetition strengthens the schema. The voice shrinks before words form. The throat closes at the hint of confrontation. Eventually, the question, is it safe to speak, becomes background noise, answered silently by the body's restraint. MLH views this as self-reinforcing syntax. The more we think in conditional phrases, I shouldn't say that, it's not worth it, they won't understand, the more we reinforce obedience as internal grammar. In NSL, this schema manifests as somatic predictability. Breath holds, shoulders tighten, eyes avert. The body remembers what the mind no longer questions. Somatic submission. When the body becomes the boundary, the obedient body is disciplined long before the obedient mind. Posture, tone, and breath tell the story. You can see it in the slightly raised shoulders of someone afraid to offend, the shallow inhale before a difficult truth, the monotone of someone who has learned that passion invites punishment. From a polyvagal perspective, these are submission cues, biological signals of non-threat designed to preserve connection. They are effective in childhood, but costly in adulthood. The same physiology that once prevented harm now prevents authentic contact. MLH interprets these cues as inward mirrors. Each withheld word reflects an outer rule internalized. The pause before confession, the laugh after dismissal, the polite nod in place of protest, all are linguistic relics of old hierarchies. Silence becomes not just absence, but a form of moral performance, proof of our goodness in systems that reward compliance over clarity. But peace built on muteness is not peace, it's paralysis with good manners. The double bind of the virtuous mute to speak is to risk rejection. To stay silent is to abandon the self. This is the double bind of the virtuous mute. The nervous system, conditioned to equate voice with violation, cannot discern that modern relationships require articulation, not obedience. Breaking this bind requires reframing silence, not as now that we've traced obedience from behavior to belief, from mirrored correction to embodied compliance, we turn toward integration. The next step is not volume, but safety. Learning that expression doesn't have to threaten connection. In the next element, reclaiming voice with safety, we'll explore practical tools to awaken authentic speech, gently rebuilding trust between breath and word through mirror-based practices and nervous system grounding. Integration practice. Reclaiming voice with safety, reclaiming your voice, isn't about becoming louder, it's about becoming truer. Many who've learned to stay quiet aren't silent because they lack words. They're silent because their bodies still associate expression with danger. In nervous system language, NSL, speech is never neutral. Every phrase carries a state signature, a trace of the body's readiness to be seen. To speak safely again, we don't begin with words. We begin with the body that holds them. Reclamation starts where suppression once began, in the breath. When we were told to quiet down, our lungs obeyed. The inhale shortened, the exhale tightened. Over time, restraint became rhythm. So now, when reclaiming expression, we must reteach the body what permission feels like. It isn't rebellion, it's regulation. This is the essence of NSL practice. Language follows physiology. Voice only flows when the body knows it won't be punished for it. Mirror monologue. Speaking into safety, begin alone. No audience, no feedback loop, just you and your reflection. The mirror becomes the first listener that doesn't judge, correct, or interrupt. Step closer, breathe through your nose and let your shoulders drop. Then softly speak one truth you've buried. I wanted more. I didn't deserve that. I was scared. It doesn't need to sound confident, it only needs to sound yours. In the mirror linguistic hypothesis, MLH, the mirror is not a metaphor, it's a method. When you see your face accompany your truth, you rewire association. This expression belongs to me. I can speak and survive. The act of watching yourself while voicing honesty reintegrates sight, sound, and self-permission. If emotion rises, pause. Emotion isn't an interruption, it's integration. Tears and tremors are syntax, the body's way of rejoining the conversation. Repeat daily for 1 minute. This is your linguistic physiotherapy, rebuilding the muscles of meaning. The voice ladder, from whisper to word. For those who've lived long inside silence, speech must be rebuilt gradually. Think of voice not as a switch but a ladder, each rung a new state of safety. 1. Whisper, start with air and shape, no pressure, no volume, just letting the throat remember its right to form sound. 2. Hum vibration reawakens resonance, it reteaches the vagus nerve that tone can soothe. 3. Speak, short truth, spoken soft. The aim isn't fluency, it's familiarity. 4. Share. When ready, bring another trusted nervous system into the space, one that listens, not lectures. This ladder honors NSL's principle. Regulation precedes revelation. As breath deepens and tone steadies, each rung builds a new safety signature in your voice print. Somatic preparation before truth-telling. Prepare the ground. Suppression wasn't mental, it was somatic, stored in muscle and fascia. The body must feel held before the voice can rise. A short ritual. Stand barefoot, feel the texture beneath your feet. Breathe into the belly, long inhale, longer exhale. Roll your shoulders back. Open your chest. Rest one hand over the heart, one at the base of the throat. Say softly, my voice belongs here. In this moment, you aren't forcing sound, you're inviting it. You're teaching the body that openness and safety can coexist. A journaling prompt after speaking. Write, let the words land through ink. Speech becomes integration when mirrored in text. Try these reflective cues. Which truths can I whisper today that I once buried? What sensations accompany honesty, warmth, release, and fear? When I silence myself, whose voice do I serve? Journaling externalizes what silence internalized. You begin to see your voice, not as a disruption, but as data, evidence of where self-trust lives and where it still hides. Mirror affirmation. Complete the practice with a phrase that recodes safety. Look into the mirror, breathe, and say slowly, my voice and safety can coexist. Repeat until the body believes it. In NSL terms, repetition is not redundancy, it's rewiring. Every kind phrase is a new neural path. This is how self-silencing unlearns itself, not through defiance, but familiarity. MLH and NSL integration. MLH, every reclaimed word becomes a new reflection. You're no longer speaking in the dialect of obedience. You're forming the grammar of self-trust. NSL, regulation through posture, breath, and tone precedes fluency. The body must first recognize safety before it can speak it. Reclaiming voice is not rebellion. It's repair. Reflection, pause, and consider, what truth am I ready to say softly? Which silence once kept me safe, but now keeps me small? Can my body trust the sound of my honesty? Answer not with intellect, but sensation. The measure of healing isn't volume, it's vibration. You've begun to rebuild safety around sound, to speak not from urgency, but from alignment. Yet voice doesn't only exist in the air, it also echoes inward. Even when lips stay still, language continues, looping, rehearsing, repressing. In the next element, cognitive coherence, rewriting internal dialogue, we'll turn inward to explore how silence becomes inner speech and how to rewrite those looping narratives through conscious phrasing, NSL tone, and MLH reflection, transforming rumination into resonance. Cognitive coherence, rewriting internal dialogue. Even when we stop speaking outwardly, language doesn't end. It moves inward, transforming into thought, rumination, and rehearsal, the quiet monologue behind the eyes. For many, this inner speech becomes a second silence, a looping echo that repeats what could not be said aloud. The inner voice, once meant for reflection, can harden into regulation. It polices tone, censors expression, and narrates worth in the grammar of past authority. This is the echo of obedience, now internalized as self-talk. In truth, few of us are ever silent, we simply carry our critics inside. Inner silence as speech cognitive science recognizes inner speech as a function of self-regulation. We use language internally to plan, reflect, and anticipate. But when early environments paired expression with threat, inner speech becomes defensive rather than reflective. Instead of guiding, it governs. In this state, silence is not absence, it's occupation. Thoughts loop through warning phrases. Don't say that. They'll get upset. You'll ruin everything. These fragments are linguistic fossils, remnants of parental tone, social correction, or cultural norm. Each phrase once ensured belonging. Now they perpetuate suppression. Under the mirror linguistic hypothesis, MLH, such internal dialogue is a mirror turned inward, an unconscious repetition of the voices that shaped us. Under nervous system language, NSL, the physiological state linked to those phrases, tension in the jaw, shallow breath, and tightened throat is reactivated each time we think them. The result is state-dependent syntax. Our thoughts adopt the rhythm of our regulation. A braced body thinks in imperatives, a calm body in curiosity. The loop, rumination and rehearsal psychologically, two dominant forms of inner silence emerge. Rumination, replaying past pain. Rehearsal, scripting future safety. Rumination keeps the system anchored in threat memory. The body relives unresolved moments, seeking mastery through repetition. Rehearsal, meanwhile, anticipates confrontation, rewriting conversations before they happen to minimize risk. Both are attempts at control in environments where voice once lacked power, yet both trap the nervous system in false fluency, many words, no resolution. Through the MLH lens, these loops are mirrors without witnesses, self-dialogues, unreflected by another's empathy. NSL views them as autonomic feedback, the body's ongoing attempt to find safety through simulation. The cost is cognitive dissonance. We speak safety in theory, but embody tension in practice. The inner critic, grammar of control. The inner critic is not a villain, it's a linguist. It catalogues past corrections and translates them into internal commandments. Should, must, and never become the syntax of self-surveillance. From an MLH perspective, this critic speaks the dialect of our earliest mirrors. Its tone, vocabulary, and urgency are inherited. Every self-scolding thought is a ventriloquism of memory. In NSL, each criticism is also a somatic cue, a contraction, a microflinch, a held breath. These aren't separate, they're synchronized. The nervous system tightens as the sentence lands, proving that language and physiology remain fused. Over time, this pairing becomes a closed loop. Thought triggers tension, tension validates thought. To break the loop, coherence must return, the alignment of meaning, tone, and body. Cognitive behavioral lens. Beck's triad, Aaron Beck's cognitive triad. Thoughts and feelings trigger bidirectional behaviors and feeling. It describes how perception shapes reality. Inner speech mediates all three. Thought, my voice causes harm. Feeling, anxiety, behavior, silence. As repetition strengthens this loop, the brain mistakes it for truth. But the triad also offers a doorway. Change one element, and the others begin to follow. Rewriting thought requires not affirmation, but attunement. NSL teaches that tone, even internal tone, determines trust. MLH reframes rewriting not as denial, but as translation, finding words that the body can believe. The internal dialogue reframe, to move from rumination to regulation. Try this 3-step process. It's not a script, it's a structure one. Notice the looping statement. Become conscious of the phrase that repeats. Identify its emotional state. Fear, guilt, shame. Ask, whose voice is this? Recognition breaks fusion. 2. Write it out. Externalize the thought onto paper. Seeing it separates the self from the sentence. The page becomes a mirror, not a master. 3. Rephrase in NSL tone. Translate the phrase from contraction to curiosity. Examples. No one listens to me. Becomes my voice deserves space. Not everyone can hear it. I always mess things up. Becomes I'm learning. Mistakes are part of movement. I shouldn't feel this way. Becomes my feelings are signals, not shame. Speak the rephrased sentence aloud. Let breath deepen as you do. Notice how the body responds. A drop in the shoulders, a softening in the jaw. This is cognitive coherence when word and body agree. Each repetition is a neurolinguistic repatterning. New phrasing, new physiology. Bidirectional translation. True coherence is bidirectional, body influencing thought, thought influencing body. NSL teaches that when we shift posture or breath, we alter inner tone. A steady exhale invites gentler phrasing. A softened gaze opens interpretation. Try pairing rewritten phrases with physical cues. Hand on chest while saying, my voice matters. Long exhale during, I can take my time. These embodied affirmations create a feedback loop of calm, the inverse of rumination. The NSL principle, tone before truth in dialogue, inner or outer tone precedes meaning. If your inner voice speaks harshly, even accurate insight lands as a threat. To restore trust, soften tone first, then refine content. Practice whispering rewritten sentences slowly, with warmth. Feel the vocal vibration travel through the chest. This somatic resonance signals safety more convincingly than logic ever could. In MLH terms, this is mirror calibration, reintroducing the kind of tone that builds, not breaks, meaning. Repetition as reprogramming. The brain learns through rhythm. Neuroplasticity is not magic, it's a method. Each time you rehearse a gentler phrase, the old script weakens. Think of it as linguistic strength training. Every compassionate sentence is a new synaptic path, a fresh mirror reflecting safety rather than scrutiny. Repetition doesn't deny pain, it redistributes attention. Instead of amplifying the threat, it amplifies trust. MLH and NSL synthesis. MLH. The language you use internally mirrors the earlier speech you absorbed. To rewrite your mind, you must rewrite your mirrors. NSL. Safety isn't silence, it's synchrony. When thought, tone, and tension align, the system exits survival mode and enters coherence. Rewriting inner dialogue is less about positivity, more about precision, crafting sentences your body can live in. Reflection practice. Set aside 10 quiet minutes. Breathe low and slow. Then ask yourself, what does my inner silence keep repeating? Whose tone echoes through my thoughts? What phrase could bridge my mind and body today? Write one looping sentence you know well. Rephrase it using NSL principles: gentle tone, balanced tempo, embodied breath. Read it aloud. Let the vibration settle. The shift may be subtle, a small warmth, a sense of space. But this is the nervous system recognizing a new reality. Once the inner monologue changes tone, outer dialogue follows. A regulated mind doesn't demand silence or scream for attention. It speaks with steadiness. In the final element, from suppression to sovereignty, we'll trace how awareness matures into authorship, how silence once served, but no longer rules. You'll learn to carry voice as choice, not an act of rebellion, but a declaration of belonging. Closing whisper, from suppression to sovereignty, every silence tells a story. Some are soft moments of peace, reverence, or pause. Others are heavy, born of fear, shame, or fatigue. Across this episode, we've journeyed through the many faces of silence, the learned restraint of childhood, the cultural conditioning that prizes compliance, the digital echoes of withdrawal, and the internal dialogues that repeat what we once couldn't say aloud. But every silence, however protective, holds a paradox. What began as a shield can become a shroud. The same quiet that once preserved belonging can, in time, prevent becoming. Healing begins when we recognize that the voice withheld is not gone. It is waiting. This final reflection is not a call to speak louder, but to speak from sovereignty, the alignment of safety, truth, and self-trust. The arc of reclamation. We've traveled from suppression to awareness, from awareness to safety, and from safety to sovereignty. Each step has asked not for performance, but presence. Suppression was obedience, a learned reflex shaped by authority. Awareness became insight, understanding that silence carried history. Safety grew through practice, mirror monologues, breathwork, and rephrased truths. Sovereignty emerges as choice, the ability to decide when, how, and whether to speak. In nervous system language, NSL, sovereignty isn't dominance, it's regulation. It's the ability to hold both truth and tenderness in the same breath. A sovereign nervous system doesn't collapse under tension. It modulates, adjusts, and stays curious. In the mirror linguistic hypothesis, MLH, sovereignty is authorship, no longer repeating the phrases of past mirrors, but writing your own. The voice becomes reflection and creator, language shaping life, not merely echoing it. Silence as form of safety. For many, silence began as wisdom. It kept the peace, preserved connection, and shielded the self from further harm. But protection becomes prison when never revisited. When silence goes unexamined, it calcifies into identity. The body mistakes stillness for virtue, even when longing for expression. Over the years, this has become a spiritual fatigue, the ache of unspoken truth. MLH reminds us, every unspoken word still vibrates within. The unsaid is not erased, it reverberates inward, altering self-perception. NSL echoes this. Muscles remember tension even after the threat passes. To reclaim sovereignty, we honor silence as a teacher, then graduate from its lessons. The maturity of voice. A mature voice is not reactive. It doesn't rush to fill space or prove worth. It listens, integrates, and then articulates from alignment. In earlier stages of healing, voice often emerges in waves, bursts of expression after years of suppression. This is natural. The pendulum must swing before settling. But sovereignty refines expression into discernment. Discernment asks, is this truth ready to be spoken? Is the listener resourced to receive it? Can I speak without shrinking or shaming? Sovereign speech is not about winning, it's about weaving. Connection through coherence. The anatomy of sovereignty, in psychological terms, sovereignty integrates cognitive clarity, awareness of your narrative, emotional literacy, the capacity to name and regulate feelings, somatic grounding, presence within the body, relational empathy, attunement without enmeshment. In MLH, these dimensions align as mirrored reflections, mind, emotion, body, and connection, forming a fluent lexicon of authenticity. In NSL, each dimension corresponds to a physiological state, coherent breath, balanced tone, grounded stance, open gaze. Together, they create the conditions for truth-telling without trauma, speech that heals rather than harms. Reframing silence. The aim is not to erase silence, but to redefine it. Sovereign silence is not suppression, it is selection. It's the pause before precision, the exhale before empathy. Ask yourself, does my quiet feel calm or constrained? Is this silence a boundary or a barrier? Am I withholding or simply holding space? In sovereignty, silence becomes spacious, not suffocating. It is chosen, not coerced. Voice is relationship. The voice is not solitary, it is relational. Every word is an invitation, to self, to other, to understanding. When you speak from regulation, your tone becomes co-regulation, the sound of safety shared. NSL teaches that prosody, the melody of speech, is the body's social signal. It tells others whether presence is welcome. Sovereignty refines prosody into truth with tenderness, firm without force, soft without submission. Through MLH, the voice becomes a mirror, reflecting not just self-perception, but collective conditioning. Each conscious phrase reshapes the social lexicon. What becomes permissible, what becomes sacred, what becomes healed. Integration practice. Speak one sentence as a living ritual. Begin each day with one honest sentence. It need not be profound, only sincere. Examples. I feel uncertain but willing. I want peace more than proof. I am allowed to be seen. This daily act is linguistic exposure therapy, reintroducing the nervous system to visibility, truth, and coherence. Speak softly but steadily. Each utterance lays new myelin, a physiological reminder that truth can coexist with calm. Compassion for the old script. Do not shame the silence that once saved you. It was the only language your body knew. Sovereignty doesn't scold the child who hid. It thanks them. In MLH terms, every outdated phrase is a historic mirror, not to be smashed but retired. In NSL, each suppression pattern was an autonomic solution, intelligent in context, incomplete in adulthood. To evolve, we don't erase these scripts, we annotate them. We add the missing lines. You were right to protect yourself. And now you can speak. The sovereign state, when voice aligns with truth, and truth aligns with safety, the system reaches coherence, the nervous system's version of sovereignty. In this state, speech is steady, eyes are open, breath is full. No longer does expression trigger collapse. It generates connection. The voice becomes an instrument, not an alarm. This is the somatic signature of liberation. stillness without suppression, sound without strain. MLH, NSL synthesis MLH. Sovereignty is authorship speaking in self-written syntax, no longer mimicking the voices of old authority. NSL. Sovereignty is regulation, breath, tone, and body synchronized with truth. Together they form a new grammar, one where silence and sound both serve authenticity. Reflection. As we close this episode, reflect. Which silences still serve you and which now stifle? What truths are waiting for the safety of your voice? How might you speak, or pause, in ways that honor both honesty and harmony? Write one sentence that symbolizes your sovereignty. Say it aloud. Feel its resonance settle into the chest. Let the vibration remind you. Safety and self-expression are not opposites. Which leads us to the next episode titled Episode 8, Anchoring Safety. In our next conversation, Anchoring Safety, we'll explore how language can actively co-regulate fear, how words become physiological anchors, stabilizing us and those we speak with. We'll trace the linguistics of reassurance, the biology of trust, and the art of anchoring presence in moments of overwhelm. If this episode reclaimed your voice, the next will help you steady it, turning speech into sanctuary. Thank you for walking with me through the script of silence. Each episode, each breath, each word is an unfolding of awareness toward presence and human being. Mirror Talk isn't about flawless speech. It's about conscious conversation with your nervous system, your memories, and the mirrors around you. So as you leave this space, don't rush to fill the quiet. Let silence speak its new truth, not fear, not fawning, but freedom. Every unspoken word waits for the right breath. Take it, your voice remembers. Your body knows the rhythm of truth. Your voice is its echo. Speak when you're ready, softly, but surely. Until next time, you've been listening to Mirror Talk, the language of the nervous system. I'm James Miller.